the 6-level model for reviewing your own work. In order to know what your priorities are, you have to know what your work is. And there are at least 6 different perspectives from which to define that. To use an aerospace analogy, the conversation has a lot to do with the altitude. Let's start from the bottom, or most mundane, and go up. On the runway are your current actions. This is the accumulated list of all the actions you need to take. All the phone calls you have to make, the emails you have to respond to, the errands you've got to run. At 10,000 feet are current projects. Creating many of the actions that you currently have in front of you are the 30 to 100 projects on your plate. These are the relatively short-term outcomes you want to achieve, such as setting up a home computer, organizing a sales conference, moving to a new headquarters. At 20,000 feet are areas of responsibility. You create or accept most of your projects because of your responsibilities. Your job may entail at least implicit commitments for things like strategic planning, administrative support, staff development. And your personal life has an equal number of such focus arenas: health, family, finances, etc. Listing and reviewing these responsibilities gives a more comprehensive framework for evaluating your inventory of projects. Up at 30,000 feet are your 1 to 2 year goals. What you want to be experiencing in the various areas of your life and work 1 to 2 years from now will add another dimension to defining your work. Often meeting the goals and objectives of your job will require a shift in emphasis of your job focus, with new areas of responsibility emerging. At 40,000 feet is your 3 to 5 year vision. Projecting 3 to 5 years into the future generates thinking about bigger categories: organization strategies, environmental trends, career and life transition circumstances. Decisions at this altitude could easily change what your work might look like on many levels. And then up at 50,000 plus feet. This is the big picture view. Why does your company exist? Why do you exist? The primary purpose for anything provides the core definition of what its work really is. It is the ultimate job description. All the goals, visions, objectives, projects, and actions derive from this and lead toward it. These altitude analogies can provide a useful framework to remind you of the multi-layered nature of your job and resulting commitments and tasks. Obviously, many factors must be considered before you feel comfortable that you've made the best decision about what to do and when. Setting priorities in the traditional sense of focusing on your long-term goals and values, though obviously a necessary core focus, does not in itself provide a practical framework for a vast majority of the decisions and tasks you must engage in day to day. Mastering the flow of your work at all the levels you experience that work provides a much more holistic way to get things done and feel good about it. Getting projects creatively underway. The 5 phases of project planning. The key ingredients of relaxed control are 1. Clearly defined outcomes, which we call projects, and the next actions required to move them toward closure, and 2. Reminders placed in a trusted system that is reviewed regularly. This is what I call horizontal focus. Horizontal focus is all you'll need in most situations most of the time. Sometimes, however, you may need greater rigor and focus to get a project under control, to identify a solution, or to ensure that all the right steps have been determined. This is where vertical focus comes in. Knowing how to think productively in this more vertical way and how to integrate the results into your personal system is the second powerful behavior set needed for knowledge work. This kind of thinking doesn't have to be elaborate. Most of the thinking you'll need to do is informal, what I call back-of-the-envelope planning, the kind of thing you do literally on the back of an envelope in a coffee shop with a colleague as you're hashing out the agenda and structure of a sales presentation. In my experience, this tends to be the most productive kind of planning you can do. True, every once in a while you may need to develop a more formal structure or plan to clarify components, sequences, or priorities, But as a general rule, you can be pretty creative with nothing more than an envelope and a pencil. The greatest need I've seen in project thinking in the professional world is not for more formal models. Usually the people who need those models already have them or can get them as part of an academic or professional curriculum. Instead, I've found the biggest gap to be the lack of a project-focusing model for the rest of us. We need ways to validate and support our thinking no matter how informal. The good news is there is a productive way to think about projects, situations, and topics that creates maximum value with minimal expenditure of time and effort. It happens to be the way we naturally think and plan, though not necessarily the way we normally plan when we consciously try to get a project under control. In my experience, when people do more planning more informally and naturally, they relieve a great deal of stress and obtain better results. The natural planning model. You're already familiar with the most brilliant and creative planner in the world, your brain. You yourself are actually a planning machine. You're planning when you get dressed, eat lunch, go to the store, or simply talk. Although the process may seem somewhat random, a quite complex series of steps in fact has to occur before your brain can make anything happen physically. Your mind goes through 5 steps to accomplish virtually any task. First, defining purpose and principles. Second, outcome visioning. Third, brainstorming. Fourth, organizing. And fifth, identifying next actions. A simple example is planning dinner out. The last time you went out to dinner, what initially caused you to think about doing it? It could have been any number of things: the desire to satisfy hunger, socialize with friends, celebrate a special occasion. As soon as any of these turned into a real inclination that you wanted to move on, you started planning. Your intention was your purpose, and it automatically triggered your internal planning process. Your principles created the boundaries of your plan. You probably didn't consciously think about your principles regarding going out to dinner, but you thought within them. Standards of food and service, affordability, convenience, and comfort all may have played a part. In any case, your purpose and principles were the defining impetus and boundaries of your planning. Once you decided to fulfill your purpose, what were your first substantive thoughts? Probably not point 2A, 3B, subset B in your plan. Your first ideas were more likely things like Italian food at Giovanni's or sitting at a sidewalk table at the Bistro Cafe. You probably also imagined some positive picture of what you might experience or how the evening would turn out. That was your outcome visioning. Whereas your purpose was the why of your going out to dinner, your vision was an image of the what, of the physical world looking, sounding, and feeling the ways that best fulfilled your purpose. Once you'd identified with your vision, what did your mind start to think about? What time should we go? Is it open tonight? Will it be crowded? Should we change clothes? Is there gas in the car? That was brainstorming. Those questions were part of the naturally creative process that happens once you commit to some outcome that hasn't happened yet. Your brain noticed a gap between what you were looking toward and where you actually were at the time, and it began to resolve that cognitive dissonance by trying to fill in the blanks. This is the beginning of the how phase of natural planning. But it did the thinking in a somewhat random fashion. Lots of different aspects of going to dinner just occurred to you. You almost certainly didn't need to actually write all of them down on a piece of paper, but you did a version of that process in your mind. Once you had generated a sufficient number of ideas and details, you couldn't help but start to organize them. You may have thought or said, first we need to find out if the restaurant's open. Or, let's call the Andersons and see if they'd like to go out with us. Once you've generated various thoughts relevant to the outcome, your mind will automatically begin to sort them by components, priorities, and/or sequences of events. Components would be, we need to handle logistics, people, and location. Priorities would be, It's critical to find out if the client really would like to go to dinner. Sequences would be, first we need to check whether the restaurant is open, then call the Andersons, then get dressed. Finally, you focus on the next action that you need to take to make the first component actually happen. Call Suzanne's to see if it's open and make the reservation. These 5 phases of project planning occur naturally for everything you accomplish during the day. You have an urge to make something happen, you image the outcome, you generate ideas that might be relevant, you sort those into a structure, and you define a physical activity that would begin to make it a reality. And you do all of that naturally, without giving it much thought. But is the process described the way your committee is planning the church retreat? Is it how you're organizing the wedding or thinking through the potential merger? Have you clarified the primary purpose of the project and communicated it to everyone who ought to know it? And have you agreed on the standards and behaviors you'll need to adhere to make it successful? Have you envisioned success? Have you gotten all possible ideas out on the table? Have you identified the mission-critical components, key milestones, and deliverables? Have you defined all the aspects of the project that could be moved on right now, what the next action is for each part, and who's responsible for what? If you're like most people, the answer is probably not. There are likely to be at least some components of the natural planning model that you haven't implemented. You can try it for yourself right now if you like. Choose one project that is new or stuck or that could simply use some improvement. Think of your purpose. Think of what a successful outcome would look like. Where would you be physically, financially, or whatever? Brainstorm potential steps. Organize your ideas. Decide on the next actions. If you do this, you should be clearer about where you want to go and how to get there.